Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
What's up guys, I'm Andy from 1A Auto. Today I'm going to show you how to install some brakes on this 2011 Ford Explorer. If you need these parts or other parts for your vehicle, click the link in the description and head over to 1aauto.com. I'm going to remove this left rear wheel. I'm going to use a 19mm socket and a breaker bar. I'm just going to crack these lug nuts free before I lift the vehicle. Now I'm going to raise the vehicle. I'm using a 2-post lift. If you're doing this at home, you can do it with a floor jack and jack stands. Now I'll pull all these lug nuts off and take the tire off. I'm going to take these caliper bolts out. I'm going to use a 15mm wrench. This one happens to be a skinnier 15mm wrench. If you don't have a 15mm wrench this skinny, you could just use some pliers to hold that stud from spinning. And then I'm going to use a 13mm socket and a ratchet. Loosen up this bolt and I'll take it out. And I'll do the same for the top bolt. Pull that bolt out as well. So I'm going to use a screwdriver and slide this caliper off. You can try to compress it a little bit, but it's not gonna compress. So we're just gonna have to slide this off like this. And slide this out. We've got a bungee cord. Just gonna send the bungee cord over this frame right here. Go through the caliper holes. I'll just wrap it around like that. Just put it out of the way. I'm going to take these two caliper bracket bolts out. I'm going to use a 15mm socket and a breaker bar. Just going to break them free with this. Then I'll use a 15mm socket and a ratchet to take them out. Take that bolt out, and I'll take this bolt out. We can either take these pads off now before we pull the bracket off, or when you pull the bracket off, you can take them off on the bench. All right, I'm going to put a lug nut on here so that the rotor doesn't fall when I hit it. I'll take a hammer and I'm just going to hit all around here and hopefully it breaks free. Oh, pretty easy. Now we'll take the lug nut off and pull the rotor straight off. Here's our old brakes. Here's our new brakes from 1aauto.com. As you can see, the pads have the same shape. They have the same pad material on the bottom. The new ones are obviously a lot thicker. The rotors are the same height. Same single non-vented rotor. Get yours at 1aauto.com and you'll be ready to rock and roll. Before we put a new rotor on, we want to take a wire brush and just clean up this hub surface. Make sure it's good, make sure it's nice and flat so that the rotor sits properly on the hub. This one's not too bad. There is a little bit of rust on here, but generally it's pretty good. All right, we're going to clean this caliper bracket up. First, I'm going to take these caliper slides out. Take some brake parts cleaner, clean up these pins. Take a little bit, put it in the hole, and then just clean this out a little bit. And we'll take a little bit of brake caliper lube, slide it on the pin, reinsert the pin. We'll do the same for the other one. Now I'm going to take a wire brush. I'm going to clean off where these pad guides are, these pad clips. Get those nice and clean. Pull up these pad clips. Take the wire brush again and clean right under here. Get some of the rust out. Take the back side of the clip, just take a little of that rust out. We can reinstall the clip. And then I'll do the same for the other side. I'm going to install the rotor on backwards, and I'm going to take some brake parts cleaner. And I'm going to clean off the rotor. There is a protective coating on it to prevent it from rusting. Then I'll flip the rotor around, install it properly, and clean this side. And then wipe it down with a rag. This rotor has multiple holes for this retainer screw. This vehicle it was missing on. If you have it, now would be the time to install it. Since this retainer bolt's missing, I'm just going to use a lug nut to hold the rotor on. I'm going to install this caliper bracket, slide this over the rotor, take the bolts, install the bolts. I use a 15mm socket and a ratchet and just snug these up. Now I'm going to use a torque wrench with a 15mm socket. I'm going to torque these to 111 foot-pounds. So I'm going to install these pads. I'm going to use some grease, some caliper grease. I'm going to make sure I get it just on the ears. Make sure you don't get any on the pad surface. So if your hands are dirty, try not to touch any of the pad surface. I'm going to install these brake pads. Just slide that in position. Do the same for the inboard one. Now I can remove my bungee cord. Slide that out of the way. Now for this caliper, you actually need a special tool to compress the piston in. How the tool works is as it's compressing the piston in, it is rotating the piston, and that'll sync up the parking brake mechanism in there, and it'll push the fluid back through the lines and back up to the master cylinder into the reservoir. There's two little pins on here. Those have to line up with those little slots, and when we're done we want those slots going up and down just like that so that it lines up with the pin on the brake pad itself. Just going to tighten this up. As you can see, the piston is spinning. That looks pretty good right there. We'll try that. Loosen up the tool. Pull it out. And my guide slots are straight up and down. Let's see if it fits on the caliper. Fits over the pads, and it does. These caliper bolts have some thread locker on them. If you want to, you can add some more thread locker. Now I'm going to torque these bolts. Factory spec is 53 foot-pounds. So I'll use my 15mm wrench to hold the slide pin and torque these down. Now I'll pull my wrench out. Now I'll take this lug nut off, reinstall the wheel, take my lug nuts, install the lug nuts. I'm going to use my 19mm socket and a torque wrench. I'm going to torque these lug nuts in a star pattern to 100 foot-pounds. The reason I do it in a star pattern is so that the wheel gets torqued down evenly. After I'm done the brake job, I'm going to want to pump the brake pedal because there is a little bit of an air gap between the brake caliper piston and the brake pads themselves. This will get rid of that air gap. Make sure the pedal is nice and hard. It's always a good idea to check your brake fluid level after you're done the brake job.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.